Hello guys, welcome to today's tutorial. So in this part of the tutorial, we're going to be looking at the schema, and we're also going to be creating our first schema. We'll also create the services and the controller, and we'll eventually bootstrap our app. The first thing we want to do is create a folder called we'll also create another folder, services. We'll also create our controller folder. Then the next thing we want to do is create the model, which is the schema. We'll move all this folder into the source directory. And inside the model folder, we'll create our user model, which is user.model.js. And then the first thing is to import Mongoose. First name, the last name. And then the role. Also the token field. And then we also set the timestamp, so the Mongo will automatically update all the timestamp to create the created ads and update it whenever, and update the updated ads field whenever we update a user. This is where we assigned the schema. and we'll export it also. And then the next thing is the user service. We also need, for updating a user, so here we're going to call it we're going to pass in the body. So let's pass in query and then the options. So these options will be optional field. And also the updates parameters. Okay, I don't think so. In the find one and update, we pass in the query, the update, and the options. I'll change this to find one and update. So the next thing we want to do is define user. Define user services. So we don't need the update. We just need the query and the options. I will change it to find one. User.find one query, then options. So the option will be default to an empty object. So if you don't pass an option, it will automatically default to an empty object. And then the next thing we want to do is to define our validate password function. Validate with password. Email password. Passing the email and the password. First of all, we'll find the user. And if the user does not exist, we want to return false. So we just removed the email and passing just one which will match for if they are the same name, it will match it. Instead of defining email and putting colon another email, we can just pass in email, it will match it automatically. And then if there is no user, we'll send in a return false. Now we want to check if the user is valid by checking the comparing the password that was passed in by the user with password in the user. So we need to create this compare password in the schema. So I'm just going to paste the code for that. So since we are not working in a TypeScript file, so I'm just going to remove the types that was defined there. This is just a JavaScript Express Node backend. So we are attaching the pre-function to the schema. We are checking if the user password was modified. If it's not modified, so we just move on. Meanwhile, if it is modified, we take in the password and we encrypt it and attach it to be the user password. So here I'm going to import the bycrypt from bycrypt. Or the bcrypt. So I create the salt and then the hash, which is the hash is equivalent to the encrypted version of the password. So we replace the user password with the hash, and then this is a compare password method which we attach to the user schema. So what we do there is just compare the user password with the password of the password in the collection of the user stored in the backend, stored in the database. So if there's an error, it returns false. And then also we need to attach the salt, also this salt worker factor in our environment variable. I'll give it a value of 15. So all we're doing here is comparing the password of the user with the hashed value. So if the password is valid, it returns true, else it returns false. So we want to say if it is not valid, we want to return false. So if it's valid, we return it's valid. So we want to return the user instead of returning true. So but we need to remove the password from being returned to the user. So instead of doing a delete user.password, what we're going to do is we're going to omit the password using lodash, which what it does is create another object while removing the user.password. The reason why doing that is because it's not advisable to do a delete on an object. It could cause a lot of errors. It could even crash your backend if not handled properly. So instead of deleting, what we'll do is we'll just omit using the lodash omit function. So we import the omit from lodash. Now that we have the user service, the next thing is to create the controller. So we just create a file called user.controller.js. So inside the file, we want to create our handler functions. The functions will be, the first one will be the function for creating a user. So that will be export const create user. Which is an asynchronous function. You pass in the request, response, and next function. So what we're doing is we are wrapping everything in a try-catch function, and then we are trying to fetch the user from create user, which is our services. So also we need to omit the password because sending back to the user. I'm going to change this implementation because I don't really like this implementation that was generated with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all get the user email, and then we're going to check if a user with the same email exists. So I'm going to use the -get to get the email from the request. So basically what get does is get the value at from the object, and if the result value is undefined, the default value it returns. It can return a default value in place of that, but we are not going to be adding the return value because we don't want it to return anything if it is false. So then we check if there is a user already with that email. So if there's a user with that email, we return a response to the user that someone has already registered with this previous email or something like that. So I'm going to status 40, not 403 or 409. I think 403 and 409 are used for conflicts. Or 409, that should be 409. So .json. So we're going to send a message back to the user stating that the user already exists. So if user does not exist, then we'll proceed by creating the user, spread out the body, so if so there is no need for the if statement. So so if the user is created, we send in the reason why I'm not wrapping this in a if statement is because if there's an error, the try catch will catch it, and since it has caught the error, we will just send a response from the catch block. If there's any error, which will say, oops, something went wrong. So I'm going to change this to 409, which is for conflict. So the next thing we're going to do is implement the get user handler. So we'll first of all get the user ID from the body, or I mean from the param. Yeah. And then check if the user exists. So if the user exists, we send in the user. So the next thing we want to do is define our route. So we need to have a root router. So we'll just call it routes. And then create the user route inside the user folder. Create a user folder, and then go in the root router. What we want to do is import express from express, and then define our routes, our routers. So that will be const router equals to express.router. I will export the router for now. We are not yet including our routes in the router yet because we don't have any now. So let's create our user routes. So inside the user folder, we'll create a routes.js. And then we import express also from express. Define the user route. To be equals to express.router also. They're using user router. We can now define our route. So the first route we want to define is the get route, is the create. This is going to be a post route. So the next thing we want to do is we want to import our create user handler in the controller folder. So we also need to create our validation rules to validate the response, the request parameters coming from the front end or the body coming from the front end. So what I usually do is I'll create a utils folder in the source directory or middleware inside the source directory. And then inside the middleware, we have the validation folder. And inside the validation folder, we're going to have our validation file. So I'm going to call it validator.js. And then inside the validator file, we need to import express validator. And we'll also import the body from express validator. So we can validate the request from the payload in the body. So we import the body and validation rules. Oh, validation results should that be? So let's export our user validator. Our user validation rules. This way we define the roles in an array form. So the first one we define is the name. And it mustn't be empty. Yeah. And then the next is email. Also, it must not be empty. The password, the first name, last name. So you can define these rules any way you. For example, the email, you can also say must be email, that it should be is email or something. So I'm just implementing it basic, showing you how to implement the basic validation rule here. You can do a lot of combination for these rules. You can limit the length. For example, for the password, it must be a certain length. So now we're defining our validate function. So this validate function would basically just extract the errors and return them in a response. You can see we are passing in the request response at the next, and then return a response of 422 and the errors. So that should be validation results, not validation rules. I imported it, the validation results. So now in the user route, we need to import both the rules, the validation rules, and the validation function. So this is how we implement the validation. So once we've extracted, we define the rule, then validate will use the rule to validate the request coming in. So I want to import this also from the middleware validation and validator file. So now that we have our create user route, before we test it, I also want us to finish up with the login route also. and the log out the session. So, but we also need to define our get route to get a single user. But we don't really need that. Usually we'll use the get user for admins. If you have an admin dashboard that's where you can manage your users' accounts, you can see all the user accounts, then you can implement it. But for this application, we don't need, you don't need to be able to fetch a user. So we export our user router for now. And then the next thing we want to do is create our session controller, which we'll be using for login. So we'll define it here as create user session, and asynchronous function. So we're calling validate with password. So here we'll pass in the body, which should be the username and the password. But this validate with password, we haven't created the service. So we are going to do that in a minute. So I'm just going to get the body from the request and send it to the validate with password. So the next thing we want to do is to import that, but we haven't defined it yet. We'll import this the get function from Lodash, and then we'll okay, I think we already have that in our user service. So I'm just going to import it from our user service. Pass in the body because it's expecting both the username and the password. So if no user, will return a response of invalid rest.status. Yeah. Dot JSON. It's a message invalid user or password. So if the invalid validate with password fails, we return a response with the message invalid user or password. Now we need to create the session. So, but we haven't created the session services. This is where we need to create the session, because we want to track the user session. We'll pass in the user ID and also we need to get the user agent from the request. That is the browser the user is using. So if there is none, we'll just now create the session service in a session folder, sessions, and then we'll add the file sessions.services.js.service.js. So we create a function, a SQL function that will create the session. Passing the user ID and the user agent. So this should be an exported function. Export const. Export. Okay. Async function. So we also need to create the session model, the schema for the session, because we'll also be saving it in the database. So I'm just going to paste it and then import the Mongoose. So the simple schema, the user ID, and the user agent. The users, the valid and user agent, I mean. So valid is either true or false, where user agent is the user's browser and the user is the user object. So we export the session, attach the schema and export the session. So what we are doing here is we are referencing the users object, user schema. So now we can import the session here and create a session. So session.create user ID. Well, and then we return session. Session.json. Remember, we are not adding the valid field, and that is because it's not a compulsory field. So what is happening here is that we are going to create a function, a utility function. So we're going to create a folder in the source directory called utils. And then inside we'll create a wt.utils.js. So right inside the folder, right inside the file, this is where we create our sign function, which will help us to sign. So I'm just going to paste the code and then explain what this does. So I'm just removing the types that was there before. So what we're doing here is we are putting in the private key from the env, from the environment variables, and then in the sign function, we're passing the object, the private key, and option to jwt.sign. So let's define our private key in our environment variables. I'm just going to give it any combination of string. Yeah. So we also need another function called decode to help us decode the token coming from the front end once the user is logged in. So right here, we are just going to use jwt.verify to verify it. So here we need to pull in the sign function. So we use to generate the access token. So also going to create another function for generating the access token. So this is for reissuing an access token with the refresh token. So what we're doing there is passing in the refresh token, and then we'll decode the refresh token. So if it's not valid or there is no decode.session, we'll return false, meaning it has expired or something, or is a wrong token. So, but if that passes, we create the session, we'll find the session, and then we also create the user and attach it back to the request. And also we create the new access token, attach it back to the user, return the access token, which will be attached to the request and sent back to the user. So we'll find the session, and if there's a session with the if there's a session consisting of the user credentials. They will create our access token like you see there. So the next thing we want to do is to create a find session function, which we can use to find a specific session. So to know if a user session is active or not. So this is a very simple function. The next thing also we need to do is create our update session function. So we can use this update session to update the valid field, if it's valid or not. So if a user logs out, we invalidate it and update it to false. So in the create session controller, we continue our create session user and LAN. We now call the create access token, pull it in from session service to create an access token. Remember, we are still creating a user session here, which is one of the login process. So we also need to create our access, our refresh token, which is like the access token. I mean the refresh token. So basically, we are making use of two different tokens here: the access and the refresh token. So normally, the access token contains the user data, while the refresh token is usually used to regenerate a new access token when an access token has expired. So we need the two for our implementation. There are some implementations which they only generate the access token, but in this we are using both the refresh and access token. Usually that is why when you log into some site, you can remain logged in for a matter of weeks. What is happening is not that you are using the same access token, is that it is being refreshed for you. The access token is being refreshed as long as the refresh token is not yet expired. So usually the access token can be, the validity might be like a week, while the refresh token validity might be up to a month or even more. In some cases, we've seen like 2 months or 3 months. So once your access token expires in the end of the week, the refresh token will be sent to the backend. It will automatically generate a new access token for you. So like that, it doesn't log you out. So you are only logged out until the point where the the refresh token itself expires. So you are now logged out forcefully, and you now need to sign in again with your password and your. That's an example of what happens usually with Facebook. You can look at, if you check Facebook, you know that you can remain signed in for weeks, for months. So basically that's what's happening. So I'm just going to import these from their respective places, the sign from the utility. Also import the create session from the session service. I think everything is imported. So now in our route, we need to create our route, our login route. I'm just going to duplicate this and edit and change this. So I'm going to create another validation rule here for logging in, which we just need the email and the password. and then we import it here. So here we import the create session. This should create session handler. Okay, create user session handler. So I'll just add the comment login route. So we also need the session route, get session route, which we use to get the current session. Delete also we'll use that to log out the user. Delete session. So if we want, we can also add a refresh token route. Well, I'm not going to be doing that. So I'm just going to do that automatically behind the screen without needing a route for that. So if it expires, if the access token expires, to automatically look for the refresh token. So we need a middleware require user login. So to secure some routes, so we're going to create the middleware require user login and create a function called require user. So we're going to pass in the request, response, and next. And basically get the user from the request. So if the user exists, if the user doesn't exist, we'll send a not authorized response. And then we'll return the next middleware in the function. So for you to to log out, you need to be logged in. So I'm going to attach the requires user. You can see it there. That's why. So now in our main router, we need to import our user router and attach it to the main router file. So here we see router.use or .use. We'll define our route, which is the /user route. Users, then we attach the user router. So before you can get to the user router, you have to hit the user's endpoint, and then it will be, and then it's for example, now this create user will be /user/create. So we're just going to rename that to login and this to log out. So I think this require user is not yet imported properly. That's why it is white. So I'm going to import it. So I think I need it. Okay, I didn't export it here. So I will just export default. I didn't import also the get from Lodash. And now export default. default require user. So since it's a default export, I don't need to put it in a bracket. So now everything is looking good. Now let's run and see. Hope we have no errors. User slash create. Oh well. So I'm just going to change this to port 3080. You can see there we haven't added our route. So let's import it and add it to the app.js file. Oh, the mistake, I didn't put a colon there. Now our app is working. So let's go back to the create. The user route. Change it to post, and then validation result is not defined. So let's go back to our validation. Oh, it should be results, not results. So let's save that and go back. Let's try this again. Undefined value. Invalid value. Okay, this should be name. Something went wrong again. Get is not defined. Okay, so I guess we didn't import get. We don't import it here. Import get from Lodash. Let's save that. And I'm gonna try that again. Validation result path username is required. Now you can see that our validation is working. And so now, after adding the username field, you can see our user has been created. Well, we are receiving the password there. So we need to omit the password there in the create user atlas. So I'm just going to bring in the omit from Lodash and add user.json. Omit the password. So we need to import it from Lodash. Save that. And then let's try that. Let's change the email and try creating another account. So you can now see we don't have the password being sent to the user. So let's try logging in, or change our request to response. Let's just copy the email and the password. Now I'm going to send it to the, okay, that should be a post request. Okay, we need to change the port there. Should be 3080. Let's see. We have another error there. It says the request gets dash gets controller session controller. So we're trying to get the body that's in create session. Oh, let me change this to request the body and see what happens. Still having an error. Request is not defined. Oh, I see. We need to pass a request response to the create user session handler. So request response. So I think we need to wrap this in a try catch. I think I also need to return response for this. Yeah, the access and the refresh token. Try catch. Then we're gonna paste it there and console log the error. Send the response of invalid username or password. Or so what we're going to do is we're going to destructure the body. So I'm just going to use the get method to get. I'm going to destructure the email and password from the body, and instead of pass it directly. So we don't need a bracket there. So session.create. Oh, we did import session here, so we need to import session. The session schema, which is the model. So let's restart that again by saving it. See about another error, which is the expires in. So we're going to change this to 60 days. Let's see what happens. Good, so it worked. But when we put our env file, it seems not to be working. Let's see what the problem is. Let's see, maybe it's the name. I'm going to open the session service, the create access token, because that's where expires in is in both of those files. So the problem is the name I use for create access token. The name was different from what was in the env. So once I replaced it, it's going to work well. So You can see here now, I'm going to replace this expires in to the right. Now we have our access and our refresh token. So that brings us to the end of this tutorial. So in the next tutorial, we're going to be looking at the CRUD operations for the nodes side of things, creating nodes, updating and deleting. And we're going to be looking at validating the user, ensuring that the user is logged in before they can perform this request. So thank you and see you next time.